everybody. I wish you well and I hope you had a good day. Welcome to the rugby people, the world of rugby, and welcome to the PWV Coaches House. In this house of us, we're going to talk about rugby mainly, but we're also going to open it up for everybody, all coaches out there who want to feel part of our discussions. We'll reach out to you and we'll get you going. It's been a long time in the making. But we are finally here. And this rugby coach house or the coaches house is a new platform where I will unpack important issues around rugby, around any other sports, on and off the field that's happening around the world. Me and my team, that's Saki and Trevor, will do our best to answer all your questions as well. Well, today, in this first show of us, we are hosting a guy who played for South Africa at a lot of levels, a guy who did things that other people are actually praying to do. And a guy who grew up in Paul too, a guy who was part of a community where he had to work himself through the ranks and out. Yeah, this guy is Jearus Nicholas, and I've known him for quite a while. I think for his lifetime. This again doesn't need any introduction, but as we go on, we will definitely give him a chance to introduce himself. I'm so honoring to honor this big show of mine, to my family, my supporters, and who have truly stand in my corner all these years. So today's coach house, I will be looking at the future of black coaches in world rugby. Good evening, Jearus Nicholas, and very welcome on this platform. As I said, it's been long, and with any further ado, I would love you to introduce yourself to our fans.
Well, thanks a million, Peter de Villiers, for this opportunity, and thank you for hosting something like this, a show where you can actually speak your mind and what you experience. And throughout my comfort years and discomfort years, I can actually agree much more onto what you add the show value to. Well, first of all, I'm Jearus Nicholas. Thanks, Mr. de Villiers. You're the guy that actually gave me such a great opportunity to showcase my talent within South African rugby, and especially in my rugby that started at Tygerberg under your coaching. You did very well with Tygerberg in 97, 98, and that is where I end up after you met up with Andre Markgraaff from the South African team that was touring England at that year, and the year after that, you actually introduced me to Griquas. And by that, I got an opportunity to actually, what you always told me is that you mustn't think like a Springbok, but you must practice like a Springbok. If you want to become the best, you must practice like the best. So I did that, and I also accomplished that to become one of the Griquas most capped players of 116 rugby caps that played for them. And I also become the most top try scorer in Griquas, and I'm still hosting the record of 64 tries within 5 seasons that I've played my rugby there. Peter de Villiers, thanks a million. You also were part of my grew up where I just stood across you there in Chicago. And like you have introduced me where I came from, I have to fight a couple of battles to also get to the highest level. But things doesn't stay there. There's a lot to add to what you actually put into us as players of color, and now again coaches of color. I would really commend you on this show to say thank you for this opportunity and platform that you have created for us as black coaches to actually make the world know everything isn't fine as it is in the news or on the radio. Everything in the system has a lot to do what we are discussing today. And thereby, I would like to say thank you. You were also my master of ceremony at my wedding with at 1998, and I would like to say thank you for such a great opportunity to be part and parcel of an excellent show that many people can only dream about.
Yeah, Jearus, for all your fans, people who followed you religiously, and remember how you have dived every time that you got the ball, and I saw the try line calling. I prayed that this guy don't injure himself. You brought something into rugby, and a lot of the youngsters, and today everybody is doing it. Let's talk about you growing up in Paul, playing sport in Paul. As Paul people, I think they're very competitive. People don't respect you in Paul for who you are. They don't want to break you down. They just want to show you that they can be better than you. And I think those kind of challenges brings the best out of anybody. And from there, you said you went to Tigerberg. That was actually challenging again, because every week we played in a big league, and it was tough opposition. And there you showed everybody how talented you are and what lies ahead of you. And then you went off to Griquas. That is the part where I want to start. Griquas. Kimberley, I studied in Kimberley for 2 years. I played for Griquas 2 years. And there you went off to Griquas. And I knew, yeah, it was a place where you either survive, you either swim, or you drown. Can you tell us how did it come that you made it in that wilderness?
One of the great things that actually happened within Griquas is the fact that there's a lot of showcasting players that actually wants to put their stamp on something, but they couldn't made it, and that was the biggest struggle and challenge for them to become part of the. At that time, it was the system that sometimes kept away those players, and at that moment, I felt the community, I felt the people, I felt the people that really stood up for rugby in the previous years, and they all acknowledged me with the fact that I did something right. And I don't know what I did right, but for them, it was excellent. And by carrying that load of mentality, of all the support of our community of color, and that is also including the other communities that was so actually further away from Griquas. There were so few of our guys that actually could have made the Griquas team. And by grabbing that opportunity, I went to church there in Florianville. And by that, I have heard what the people voices were raising up. They were telling that we so great for the fact that you there and you can showcase the people that players of color also got the potential to play in such a high division of rugby or a high casting of rugby. And I actually grabbed that and motivate myself. At that stage, I wasn't married. At that stage, I was still young. At that stage, I also got that feeling that I want to showcase that what's inside of me. And at that stage, Mr. De Villiers, you know what happens? My biggest challenge that I was having in South African rugby at that stage already was the fact that I was small. When people look at me, they will say, "You will never make it. You will never make it." And that is the thing that was actually motivating me much more to show them that size doesn't matter. The bark in the dark is not bigger than the bite. And by doing that and motivate myself, my Christianity, my belief, trusting the Lord in what I did and what I'm busy doing and still doing it. And I start to become that competitive guy that always wants to show the world that we can. And when I say we can, the players and the people of color to show the world that we also can meet everybody in the same level. And that is where I start to make a name for myself by diving over the try line. Because at that stage, there was only one guy. It was a white guy that was diving like that in 1972, and I don't know what's his name, but at that stage, 1998, when I started there at Griquas, I didn't follow that. I was doing what I did best, and that has become my trademark. And by doing that, I was sponsored, Mr. De Villiers, by what? By people who acknowledge the fact that I'm diving like that, and they paid me for every dive I made. I wasn't used to the environment. I wasn't used to being paid for those type of things that I did on the field. It was instinctively that I did things like that. But for the other people, it was making money. So they used me and I used them back. So what did they do? They paid my wedding at 1998 with each try that I scored, and I could have paid my wedding with that money.
Well done, Jearus. Wow, wow. The one thing that you alluded to was the fact that you, early in your playing days, you realized that you're a role model for the people around you. And that is what the system then didn't understand. You weren't just a rugby player. You were now a role model to a whole community where you came from. You were actually bringing hope to an hopeless community where people sometimes didn't have anything to eat, where they didn't know what's going to happen the next day. And 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 having a contract from a bigger union like Griquas meant that you have to actually look after your family too. And people didn't realize that. Um, the one thing that stands out at that stage, and we don't want to dwell on this point, but we just need to make it clear out there. How bad was it for a player of color going into an environment where then everybody wanted to keep it white? They wanted to keep the environment as it were in the past. So what they did, they brought only one or two players of color in, so that those players changed completely from what they were used to, into a character which was very, very new, because they have to adapt to the circumstances of the environment. That was firstly. And secondly, although there were 22 or 15, 22 players in the team, the players of color never ever competed with the players in the team for a spot. They only competed with the one or two quota players that was in the system then. And yeah, I think a lot of players say thank you for the quota system, but the hell of a lot of players is because of the quota system that they have lost faith and they have lost their lives, and they are today nobodies.
I most definitely agree with what you have said now, Mr. De Villiers. The fact that the quota system was brought into the rugby to give players of color like me and black players at that stage an opportunity to showcase their talent against the so-called other race white people that was playing the game at that early stage as well. And by doing that, I actually have a huge challenge to stay in the team. We were like in five wings, and in that five wings, I was the only. We were two black wings that needs to compete for the same position. But those other three wings, they were coming from the Super Rugby team as well. And now you must think about that's also a challenge because this guy had played international rugby to compete against me on local rugby. And that was the Vodacom. And through that, we have a lot of practice sessions. And getting to those practice sessions, I showcased that strength wasn't my thing, but speed, my feet, my skill, my ability, my agility, all those criteria that I've worked on compensate my body so that I can outrun, outplay, and outthink the bigger, and that is the white wings that I played against. And at that stage, there wasn't any other guy better than me on the left wing in the Griquas, And I had to make that difficult move by staying there. Otherwise, they would have shifted me to playing scrum half if I didn't make it on wing. And that was one of my biggest challenges. We had to, like you reflect to on that, we had to share positions, not with white, but with the same color, just to keep the quota system right. At that stage, we need to have 2 players on the field of color, and then 2 players, 3 players of color on the bench. But it was very competitive. But now I have to be on the lookout. If I'm not performing, then they're going to choose the other guy. Then I'm out. Because the ratio have to stay like that the whole time throughout the game. And otherwise, they would have been blamed for not using the system, and they could have get into trouble with Saru. That was one of the systems that was made to give guys like us an opportunity, but to be acknowledged in the World Cup, be acknowledged in the South African team, still as a quota player. That had actually put my mind to rest and say, but where are we heading with this type of nomination or selecting of players if it's only a quota player and you're not actually a merit player? That's my challenge still on today.
Oh, thank you, Jearus. The last question on your playing days. The culture of any team is being set by the coach. Now, how tough is it for a player of color to form part of a system wherever he turns into a coach that doesn't understand him, who doesn't know, like you just said, you had to make a plan. In Afrikaans, they say a boer maak 'n plan, but our black people are born with 7.
I'm born with one.
You just have to use the one that you were busy with, and it
Yes.
will help you. So how do you adapt to the fact that for 20 years you were used to doing something, and now just to be part of the system, just to live out your potential, your talents that God gave you, just to live that out that other people can find hope in you, you have to change completely to fit into a system where you were part of something that you never knew. How much pressure off the field and on the field did that on its own put on your players? And then the fact that you have to compete with only the black players so that you can stay in the field. The fact that you knew, I want to give my best, but I can't get injured. If I get injured, then they just replace me with one of my brothers. And how do you get off the field into conversations where you're talking about dreams and everybody know he can't say anything bad here, because we 5 sitting here, we are competing for one spot in the team. How bad were you guys transformed into something that you never ever grew up with and you never ever wanted to become?
Well, that is one of the questions that I allude to with regarding to what's happening in South Africa. And thanks for raising that point, because that's a very important point from my point of view and from a lot of other coaches' point of view who are in the system, but they couldn't raise their voice. They can't because they earn the money. And money can't buy the talent, the skill. But if you want to be wealthy, you have to keep your mouth. And at that stage, I actually felt very bad because I actually dropped out of my work, my permanent job, to actually do the thing that I am loving that much. And that is to play rugby. I've got a perception for a perception. And that is one of the things that I want to read to you tonight, Mr. De Villiers. And then you can take it from there. Because raising a voice here, raising your voice, then where do I end up? That is how they have blackmailed us in the past as black rugby colored players of color and coaches of color, not to raise your voice, because then you're out of the system. Then you become a trail to not be selected for an opportunity again. And by saying that, it's important that our truth does not flow from our tradition, but from from our tradition, flow from our truth. So many of us go through life with an inherent belief system that it's never evaluated. And if the belief system is never challenged accordingly, you will live your entire life out of a tradition. A tradition can be anything that you blindly do and believe simply because it's always done that way. So that things bring actually emotional tears to my heart to make me believe that you can still not do it today. It's because of tradition that we become not what we want to. It's because of tradition that people of color, coaches of color, players of color can't raise their voice because they know they have to sustain an income throughout the game they play. If they raise their voice, then they're out. They don't say it directly, but if people listen to what I'm saying tonight, they will acknowledge that and say, but it's the truth, by just flicking their head or saying or nodding their head and by thinking their eye and say, but I can't say much because I'm in the system. If I had to make the world know that I'm struggling to get a position in South African rugby as a coach, then it's wrong. And that is where you came in. And I felt by myself a brilliant coach with a record of 26 out of 48 games, being a coach of the Springboks. You're excellent. But why are there no opportunity? They showcased in one of the newspapers of Paul True that Paul True was one of the most influential coaches to some players that are coaches today. But if he was so influential to other coaches, why isn't he in the system? That's the same question that you are asking me. I'm out of the system. I don't know where I'm heading, but this is the challenge that we are having. The tradition isn't something that I've put there out for them to say, but we have to follow that. At this stage, we as players of color doesn't know our own tradition. We stick to what is thrown out there and say, follow this or you're out. So if you're scared, then you do that way. If you're not, if you raise your voice in a few hours or a few days or a few years, then they will not see you in their system anymore. And people will ask questions like they asked today. There is one thing that bothers me, Mr. De Villiers, is the following fact. There was an issue in the newspaper that actually touched me when they say, name 10 players. Here is the 10 players. That is a news report. This is the 10 players that missed out on a Springbok spot. And all of those players were white. I'm thinking about myself being one of the top rugby players in South Africa and haven't stepped to that platform to be known that much as to lose out on an opportunity. That also say, what's happening in South Africa? If we look to South African coaching perspective, I'm looking for somebody that still have a dream, but I'm awake now. Why do I still need to have a dream? I know I must do that. I know what is the consequences. I know what is my responsibilities. I know what is my sacrifices to achieve. I know the system, how to be appointed in the system. You have to have the following credentials. If I don't meet it, then I accept I wasn't good for the job. But that's not the case in today's life in South African rugby, Saru. But raising my voice can become very negative for me. And that's why I'm not scared. I'm standing up because of other coaches and other players of color who can't raise their voice because they might miss an opportunity that I have enjoyed for my years. So I'm actually standing here for a lot of coaches of color and players of color. When then the traditions are set, but like this quote say, is that tradition makes us believe that it's all right to be in the system where you are not acknowledged.
Wow, wow, that's a mouthful, Jearus. Believe it or not, the one thing that protected me as a coach in rugby is a negative thing. SA Rugby didn't want to give me a performance clause because they didn't think I would perform and it would be a wasting of time. And it's my performance clause that kept me in my job, because I never scored less than 84 and my highest score was 96 out of 100%. So whenever they wanted to do anything to me, they had to say, wow, this guy, that guy is ticking all the boxes and he's doing well. You just now put my attention to the next thing, the reason why we is there a future for being black? Is there a future? Because I think people have their knee on our necks for so long, and the white people got a bit tired, and then they got some of our black people in, and they pay them so nicely to keep their knees on their own people's necks, so that there's no place. If you look at all the coaches in South Africa, all the Super Rugby franchises, there's never been and there won't be a black coach there. They had Dion for a while there, Dion Davids at the Kings, and then they got rid of him because he was not good enough. And now the same guy who replaced him is so glad that Rassie is going to give Dion Davids to them to help them. I can't understand these things, you know. But if you look at our coaches at the moment, and you look at the fact that we know how to coach, we definitely know how to coach. The technical part of the game is 100%. We all have 100%, but it comes and it boils down to 20%. All the other stuff of being a coach is more important than anything else. And we do learn that in our growing up years and all those kind of stuff. How do you feel, and where do you see that our black coaches in this country, do they have a future? Is it worthwhile for them to going into coaching? Or if they enter this thing, is it just going to be frustration again all over, which he will at the end take out on his own family maybe, or his own environment, and disappointments that is there. I mean, I looked at our franchises now, and I look at how they treat the black coaches. They give them a small job to be thankful. They never give them a chance to make their own decisions. They want them to do what they will play the tune, and the coaches will dance. The black players in the system don't find any comfort in them. The assistant coach can't be a safe haven for them, because he has to look after his own job and has to dance according to the tune. So, yeah, this playing field. Do you ever think that we as people who love the game, who know the game, and who can make a difference in the lives of other people, do we really think you have a future in this game in South Africa?
Well, Mr. De Villiers, that's a strategic question that you are actually asking me. By reflecting to the strategic question is the fact that South Africa have a strategic transformation plan that's in place. Since 2002, they haven't met what they have said as equity. When they look at black, they include me as black, but I'm not black, I'm colored. They allude to say, or they show cause and say, but if you're black, you must be ethnic black. And if you look to the system today, you will get more black players than colored players, because we're black. And most of the unions, they actually do well in that position, because they don't need to appoint or get other players of color to play for them. They can use black players. By doing that, it's not fair that the system keep us out. That's another way of keeping you out. if we look to the coaches currently in the Super Rugby, there's only one guy that's been appointed in the Super Rugby, two guys that's not coaches, but they are defensive coaches and backline coaches. They're not the head coach.